The alien ship drifted into Earth's solar system like a ghost. Its hull was scarred and blackened, engines barely working. Inside the United Nations building in New York, alarms started ringing. This was only the second time in human history that aliens had visited Earth. Ambassador Keelix stepped out of the small shuttle that landed in Central Park. He was tall and thin, much thinner than he should have been. His blue-gray skin hung loose on his bones and his large eyes looked tired and sad. The crowd that gathered to watch him walk to the UN building whispered among themselves. This alien looked sick. Captain Jake Morrison waited for Keelix in the main assembly hall. Jake had been chosen to handle first contact because he was good with people and spoke several Earth languages. He had studied the few records they had from the first alien visit 10 years ago. That time, the aliens had come to trade. This time felt different. Keelix entered the Great Hall where representatives from every nation on Earth sat waiting. His translator device made his words sound hollow and strange, but everyone could understand him clearly. "People of Earth," Keelix began, his voice shaking slightly, "I come from the Zinthari Empire. We have watched your species for many years. You are young but strong. You build weapons that could help us. You have ships that could carry our warriors. We need your help." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of help do you need?" Keelix activated a small device that projected images into the air above the assembly. The pictures showed beautiful worlds with tall cities and green fields. Then the images changed. The same worlds appeared burnt and empty. Cities lay in ruins. The green fields were nothing but ash and dust. "The Vorthak swarm has destroyed our empire," Keelix said. "They are machines that eat living things to make more machines. They have taken 9 of our 12 worlds. My people are starving on the 3 worlds we have left. Soon we will all be dead." The assembly hall grew quiet. Everyone had heard stories about machine races that consumed everything in their path. "It was the stuff of nightmares. We need weapons," Keelix continued. "We need ships. We need soldiers. We know humans are good at war. You fight each other often enough. Will you help us fight the machines?" Jake stood up slowly. He looked around the room at all the world leaders, then back at Keelix. Instead of answering the question, Jake asked something that surprised everyone. "When did your people last eat a real meal?" Keelix blinked his large eyes in confusion. "I do not understand. We have nutrient supplements. We have protein paste. We survive." "That's not what I asked," Jake said gently. "When did you last sit down with your family and friends and enjoy food together? When did you last taste something that made you smile?" The alien ambassador was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, before the machines came to our farming worlds, before we lost everything." Jake nodded and pressed a button on his communicator. "Admiral Lisa Hayes, this is Captain Morrison. We have a situation here that requires the Harvest Fleet." Admiral Hayes' voice came through the speakers clearly. "The Harvest Fleet? Jake, are you sure? That's our largest agricultural operation." "I'm sure, ma'am. We're looking at people who haven't had a proper meal in 3 years. This isn't a military problem. This is a hunger problem." Keelix stood up quickly, confusion clear on his face. "I do not understand. We came for weapons. We came for soldiers. Why do you speak of food?" Jake walked over to Keelix and placed a gentle hand on the alien's thin shoulder. "Because hungry people can't fight wars, Ambassador. Hungry people can only die slowly. If you want to beat these machines, first we need to make sure you're strong enough to fight." In the hours that followed, Earth moved faster than it ever had before. Dr. Paul Stevens was pulled out of his research lab and put in charge of understanding Zinthari biology. He needed to know what foods would work for their bodies and what might hurt them. Commander Kate Phillips began calling agricultural stations all over the solar system. The Mars farming domes, the Europa fish farms, the asteroid mining platforms that grew vegetables in zero gravity. Everyone was told the same thing: prepare for the largest food shipment in human history. News networks around the world tried to understand what was happening. Military experts expected Earth to send warships and weapons. Instead, cargo ships full of farmers and chefs were being loaded with seeds, livestock, and cooking equipment. President Frank Ellis called an emergency meeting with world leaders. In the Situation Room deep under the White House, screens showed the alien worlds that Keelix had described. The pictures were terrible. Nothing grew there anymore. The soil was poisoned. The water was dirty. Millions of aliens were slowly starving to death. "Sir," said General Robert Kane, "our military is ready to help them fight. We have weapons they've never seen. We have tactics that could work against machines." President Ellis shook his head. General, how do you fight an enemy when you're too weak to hold a weapon? How do you plan strategies when you can barely think straight from hunger? These people need food first. Everything else comes after. Dr. Stevens called in from his lab. His voice was excited. Mr. President, I've got good news. Xanthari biology is similar enough to ours that most Earth foods will work for them. I can have dietary guidelines ready in 6 hours. What about their farming? Asked Secretary of Agriculture Janet Mills. Their worlds are dead, ma'am, Dr. Stevens replied. But we can fix that. Our soil restoration techniques will work. Our hydroponic systems will work. We can have them growing their own food again within months. Back in the UN building, Kalix sat in a small room with Jake. The alien ambassador looked lost and confused. Captain Morrison, I do not understand your people. We offered you trade agreements. We promised you technology. We asked only for weapons to save our species. Why do you give us food instead? Jake poured 2 cups of coffee and offered one to Kalix. The alien sniffed it carefully before taking a small sip. His eyes widened in surprise. This is pleasant, Kalix said. Warm, it tastes good. That's the point, Jake said. Ambassador, let me ask you something. If someone came to your house hungry, what would you do first? Give them a weapon or give them a meal? Kalix thought about this. A meal, I suppose. Right. And after they ate, after they felt strong again, then you might talk about other things. That's what we're doing. We're giving your people a meal first. A very, very large meal. Outside the window, they could see the first ships taking off from Earth's surface. Not warships, but cargo vessels full of food and farming equipment. The harvest fleet was beginning to assemble. 3 days later, Earth's orbit looked different. Ships were everywhere, but not the kind anyone expected. These weren't sleek warships or fast attack cruisers. These were massive, bulky vessels that looked more like floating farms than military craft. Captain Sam Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Abundance, watching the final ships join the fleet. The Abundance was huge, 3 kilometers long and covered with transparent domes. Inside those domes, thousands of plants were already growing. Wheat, corn, vegetables, fruit trees. The ship was like a flying garden. Sir, said Lieutenant Amy Chen from her communication station, the last supply ship just docked. We have everyone aboard? Sam nodded and looked at the list on his screen. The harvest fleet was bigger than most military operations. 12 main ships, each one specialized for different types of food production. 50 support vessels carrying everything from farming tools to mobile kitchens. And most importantly, over 10,000 people who knew how to grow, prepare and serve food. Chef Commander, report to the bridge, Sam announced over the ship's speakers. Maria Santos arrived a few minutes later, still wearing her kitchen uniform. She had been Earth's top military chef before this mission, but now she had a much bigger job. She was in charge of feeding an entire alien species. How are we looking, Maria? Sam asked. Good, sir. We've got chefs from every culture on Earth. French, Italian, Chinese, Mexican, Indian, you name it. Dr. Stevens sent us the dietary information for the Xanthari. My people are already working on recipes that will work for their biology. Sam smiled. Any problems? Just one, Maria said. We've never cooked for aliens before. We're guessing about what they'll like. Taste is different for every species. We'll figure it out, Sam said. That's what we do. On the other side of the bridge, Agricultural Director Ben Clark was checking reports from all the farming ships. The UES Cornucopia was ready with grain production facilities that could feed 1 million people per day. The UES Bounty had livestock areas and protein synthesis labs. Each ship in the fleet had a different job, but they all worked together like parts of a giant machine. Captain, Ben said, we're ready to start food production as soon as we reach Xanthari space. The hydroponic systems are running at full capacity. We'll have fresh food ready for distribution within hours of arrival. Lieutenant Chen's equipment started beeping. She put on her headset and listened carefully. Sir, we're getting transmissions from Xanthari space. Their ships are trying to scan us. They seem confused about what we are. Sam wasn't surprised. What are they saying? The translations are rough, but it sounds like they can't figure out what kind of weapons we're carrying. Their sensors show massive life signs, but no weapon signatures, no military shields. They think our equipment might be broken. Chef Commander Santos laughed. Our weapons are tomatoes and fresh bread. No wonder they're confused. The fleet began its journey towards Xanthari space. It would take 2 weeks to reach their destination, but the work started immediately. In the farming domes of the Abundance, workers tended to plants that would be ready to harvest when they arrived. In the kitchens, chefs practiced making meals that would work for alien biology. Dr. Stevens was aboard the UES Cornucopia, working with a team of scientists to understand everything they could about Xanthari food needs. They had samples of the aliens' nutrient paste and protein supplements. It was technically food, but barely. This stuff has everything they need to survive, Dr. Stevens told his team, but nothing they need to live well. No flavor, no texture, no variety. They've been eating the same thing every day for 3 years. What's the psychological effect of that? Asked Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the fleet's chief psychiatrist. Terrible, Dr. Stevens replied. Food is connected to culture, to family, to happiness. When you take that away, people lose hope. They stop caring about tomorrow because today tastes like nothing. On the UES Bounty, agricultural specialist Tony Garcia was working with a different problem. The Xanthari worlds had been poisoned by the machine attacks. The soil was dead, the water was contaminated, and nothing would grow. We can fix this, Tony told his team. We've done it before on Mars and Europa. Dead soil just needs the right microorganisms. Bad water just needs the right filters. It'll take time, but we can make their worlds green again. As the fleet traveled through space, other alien species began to notice. The Hegemony Council, which governed most of the galaxy, sent messages demanding to know what humans were doing. They expected Earth to send military aid to the Xanthari, not agricultural ships. President Ellis held a galactic video conference from Earth. Representatives from dozens of alien species appeared on screens around the assembly hall. Most of them looked angry or confused. President Ellis, said Counselor Vex of the Hegemony, we have reports of a massive human fleet heading toward Xanthari space. Are you planning to attack the Vorthak swarm? No, President Ellis said simply. We're planning to feed the Xanthari. The alien representatives started talking all at once. Their translators created a chaos of different languages and angry voices. Finally, Counselor Vex spoke again. You cannot solve a military crisis with food, President Ellis. The Vorthak swarm is a serious threat. They consume entire worlds. They must be stopped with weapons. Maybe, President Ellis said. But first, we're going to make sure the Xanthari are strong enough to fight. You can't win a war when you're starving. This is foolish, said another alien representative. You waste resources on feeding when you should be building weapons. President Ellis smiled. We don't see it as waste. We see it as investment. A fed galaxy is a strong galaxy. A hungry galaxy is a weak galaxy. The conference ended with most aliens still confused about human intentions, but some were curious. A few species sent their own observers to follow the human fleet and see what would happen. Back on the Abundance, Captain Rodriguez received a private message from Admiral Hayes on Earth. Sam, the whole galaxy is watching this operation. If it works, we could change how species interact with each other. If it fails, it won't fail, ma'am, Sam replied. We have the best farmers, the best chefs, and the best agricultural technology humanity has ever developed. We're not just bringing food, we're bringing hope. As the fleet approached Xanthari space, they could see the effects of the war. Dead ships floated in empty space. Planets that should have been green and blue were brown and gray. The Vorthak machines had consumed everything living and moved on, leaving nothing but empty worlds behind. Jesus, whispered Lieutenant Chen as she looked at the sensor readings. How many people lived on these worlds? Billions, Ben Clark said quietly. And now there's nothing left but dirt and metal. The 3 remaining Xanthari worlds came into view. They were alive but barely. The lights of cities were dimmed to save power. The space around the planets was empty except for a few patrol ships. It looked like a civilization that was dying slowly. All ships, Captain Rodriguez announced to the fleet. Prepare for agricultural deployment. Let's show these people what a harvest looks like. The human fleet arrived at Xanthara Prime like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of taking defensive positions or demanding surrender, the ships simply began to work. The Abundance moved into high orbit and started unfolding massive panels that looked like metal flowers blooming in space, Commander. Rodriguez watched from the bridge as his crew performed. The most unusual military operation in human history. Ben, start the atmospheric processors. Maria, get your kitchen teams ready for surface deployment. Amy, open a channel to the planet. Down on Xanthara Prime, millions of Xanthari looked up at the sky in confusion. The human ships weren't pointing weapons at them. Instead, they were dropping small pods that landed gently in empty fields around the major cities. Each pod opened to reveal something the Xanthari hadn't seen in years. Fresh food. People of Zenthara Prime, Commander Rodriguez announced through the planetary communication system. This is Captain Sam Rodriguez of the United Earthship Abundance. We're here to help, but not in the way you might expect. We're here to feed you. In the capital city, Ambassador Keelix stood with the Zenthari High Council, watching reports come in from around the planet. They're dropping food everywhere, reported General Zorth, the military commander. Fresh fruits, vegetables, bread. Our people are gathering around the landing sites. Why? Asked Elder Morix, the oldest member of the council. Why do they give us food when we ask for weapons? Calix remembered his conversation with Captain Morrison on Earth. Because they believe hungry people cannot fight effectively. They want to make us strong first. The UES Cornucopia positioned itself in orbit and began the most ambitious farming operation ever attempted. Massive machines lowered from the ship's cargo bays heading for the planet's surface. These weren't weapons. They were soil processors, water purifiers, and atmospheric regulators. Within hours, dead farmland was being brought back to life. Chef Commander Santos led the first team to land on the planet. She brought with her 50 of Earth's best cooks and a mobile kitchen that could prepare meals for thousands of people. The landing site was outside the capital city, in what used to be a public park. Now it was just dead ground and withered trees. Hundreds of Zenthari gathered to watch as the humans set up their equipment. The aliens were thin and pale, their clothes hanging loose on their bony frames. Many of them held empty bowls, hoping for something better than their usual nutrient paste. Tony, Maria called to Sergeant Garcia, start setting up the cooking stations. Make sure we have enough space for everyone who wants to watch. As the humans began cooking, something magical happened. The smell of fresh food filled the air for the first time in 3 years. The Zenthari, who had been watching from a distance, began moving closer. Children who had never smelled anything but recycled air and chemical supplements pressed against their parents, asking what the wonderful smell was. Maria had studied Dr. Stevens' notes carefully. She knew that Zenthari taste buds worked differently from human ones, but the basic concepts were the same: sweet, salty, sour, bitter. The key was to find the right combinations. Let's start simple, she told her team. Fresh bread, vegetable soup, and fruit. Basic foods that any species can enjoy. The first Zenthari to try human-prepared food was a young child who had wandered away from his parents. Maria knelt down and offered him a small piece of bread with a sweet fruit spread. The child sniffed it carefully, then took a tiny bite. His eyes went wide. He took another bite, then another. Soon he was eating eagerly, making small happy sounds. Other Zenthari saw this and began approaching the human cooking stations. Elder Morix was among the first adults to try the food. As the spiritual leader of his people, he felt it was his duty to test anything the humans offered. Maria personally served him a bowl of vegetable soup made with ingredients that Dr. Stevens had confirmed were safe for Zenthari biology. The old alien took a careful sip, then another. His hands began to shake. Tears formed in his large eyes. He looked up at Maria and spoke in his own language. The translator device rendered his words. I had forgotten that food could taste like happiness. Within hours, long lines of Zenthari formed around the human cooking stations. Families came together to share meals for the first time in years. Parents watched their children eat real food and smile. Couples sat together enjoying flavors they thought they would never experience again. Maria, called Dr. Stevens over the radio. How are the reactions? Incredible, she replied, watching a group of Zenthari children laugh as they shared a plate of fresh fruit. They're not just eating, they're celebrating. It's like they remembered how to be happy. Meanwhile, in orbit, the agricultural ships were performing miracles. The UES Bounty was using advanced biotechnology to purify the planet's water systems. The UES Cornucopia was deploying orbital farms that would provide fresh food within days. Support ships were landing with seeds, farming equipment, and technical specialists who would teach the Zenthari how to grow their own food again. Ben Clark coordinated the operation from the Abundance. Sam, we're making excellent progress. The soil restoration is working faster than expected. The Zenthari farming traditions are still intact. Once we get their land productive again, they'll be able to feed themselves. But the real success was happening on the ground. As word spread that the humans were providing free, delicious food, Zenthari from all over the planet began traveling to the distribution sites. It became a festival atmosphere. People who had been surviving on hope alone suddenly had reason to believe in tomorrow. Dr. Stevens worked alongside Zenthari scientists to understand their agricultural needs better. Your farming methods are actually quite advanced, he told Dr. Kalani, a Xanthari agricultural specialist. We can combine our soil restoration techniques with your traditional growing methods. Your planet could be more productive than it ever was before. Is this real? Dr. Kalani asked. Will our world truly be green again? Better than green, Dr. Stevens promised. We're going to make it flourish. On the third day, something unexpected happened. A group of young Xanthari approached the human cooking stations with their own ingredients. They had found some edible plants growing in protected areas and wanted to contribute to the meals. Maria welcomed them into her kitchen, teaching them human cooking techniques while learning about traditional Xanthari recipes. This is how it should be, she told her team, as she watched humans and aliens working together to prepare food. Not us feeding them, but all of us feeding each other. The news of what was happening on Xanthera Prime spread throughout the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement as the humans transformed a dying world into a place of abundance. The Galactic News Network sent reporters to cover the story, expecting to find a military operation. Instead, they found the largest dinner party in galactic history. Captain Rodriguez received a message from Admiral Hayes on Earth. Sam, the whole galaxy is talking about what you're doing. 17 species have sent requests for similar aid. The Galactic Council is demanding explanations, and the Vorthak swarm has begun moving ships toward your position. Copy that, Admiral, Sam replied. How long until they arrive? Intelligence estimates 2 weeks. Are you prepared for combat? Sam looked out at the planet below, where millions of Xanthari were eating well for the first time in years. He could see the lights of cities growing brighter as power was restored. He could see green patches appearing in the brown landscape as the soil restoration took effect. Ma'am, we're not prepared for combat, he said. We're prepared for something better. We're prepared to show the galaxy that there's an alternative to war. 3 months after the human fleet arrived, the Xanthari were no longer the same species. Their cities blazed with light as power grids ran at full capacity for the first time in years. Green fields stretched across landscapes that had been dead wasteland. Most importantly, the Xanthari themselves stood taller, moved faster, and thought clearer than they had since before the war began. General Zorth stood in the Planetary Defense Center, looking at tactical displays that showed something remarkable. His military units were reporting readiness levels higher than anything in their records. Soldiers who had been barely able to hold weapons 3 months ago were now training 12 hours a day and asking for more. It's the food, Dr. Kalani explained to the military staff. Proper nutrition affects everything. Brain function, muscle development, reaction time, morale. We're not just healthier, we're better warriors than we've ever been. Captain Lisa Manning commanded the UES Shield, one of the few actual warships in the human fleet. Her sensors detected the approaching Vorthak forces 2 weeks before they would arrive. She reported to Commander Rodriguez with mixed feelings. Sir, the Vorthak main fleet is approaching. 73 ships, including 6 of their largest consumer-class vessels. They're designed to strip organic matter from entire planets. How many people do you think they expect to find here? Rodriguez asked. Based on their attack patterns, probably a few million starving survivors hiding in underground shelters. Easy targets, Rodriguez smiled. They're going to be very surprised. The humans had spent 3 months not just feeding the Xanthari, but learning about Vorthak tactics. The machine species had one major weakness. They were programmed to consume organic matter efficiently. They expected to find desperate, disorganized resistance from starving populations. They had never encountered a well-fed species that fought back effectively. Agent Ray Foster worked with human intelligence services to coordinate the defense. He had been studying Vorthak behavior patterns and discovered something interesting. These machines are basically programmed predators, he reported to the joint Human Xanthari command staff. They're designed to overwhelm weak prey, but when prey fights back successfully, their algorithms get confused. Colonel Pete Ward commanded the human ground forces on Xanthera Prime. His troops were stationed not in military bases, but in the kitchens and farming centers that had become the heart of Xanthari society. It was an unusual defensive strategy, but it was based on human understanding of what the Vorthak really wanted. The machines don't want territory, Pete explained to General Zorth. They want organic matter to convert into more machines. So we're going to give them more organic matter than they can handle. The first Vorthak scout ships arrived on a Tuesday morning, They approached the planet expecting to find the usual signs of a dying civilization: dim lights, minimal communications, scattered defensive positions. Instead, they found something their programming couldn't interpret. Xanthera Prime was blazing with life energy. Massive orbital farms produced electromagnetic signatures that suggested billions of organisms growing at impossible rates. The planet's surface showed agricultural activity so intense that the Vorthak sensors couldn't get accurate readings. Most confusing of all, the inhabitants were broadcasting cooking shows. "This is Maria Santos broadcasting from Mobile Kitchen Unit 7, came the transmission from the planet's surface. "Today we're preparing a feast to celebrate the harvest from the northern continent. We have enough food for everyone, including any visitors who might be hungry." The Vorthak scout ship sent the data back to their main fleet and waited for orders. The machine's central command computer spent 6 hours analyzing the information before responding. This level of organic abundance was not in their programming. They were designed to consume struggling civilizations, not thriving ones. When the main Vorthak fleet arrived, they found something even more confusing. The humans in Xanthari weren't hiding or preparing for siege warfare. Instead, they were holding the largest victory celebration in galactic history. The orbital space around Xanthera Prime was filled with ships from dozens of species. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about the human food miracle, and representatives from other civilizations had come to see for themselves. The result was a massive interspecies festival with Earth's harvest fleet, providing food for everyone. Commander Rodriguez watched from the abundance as Vorthak ships took defensive positions around the planet. "Amy, open a channel to the Vorthak fleet commander." "Sir, they might not respond to communication attempts," Lieutenant Chen warned. "Try anyway. Use the galactic emergency frequency." The channel opened with a burst of static, then the mechanical voice of a Vorthak commander came through. "Human vessels, you are interfering with a scheduled consumption operation. Withdraw immediately or be processed." "Vorthak commander, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're not interfering with anything. We're having a dinner party. You're welcome to join us." There was a long pause. Define dinner party. Rodriguez looked at Maria Santos, who had just returned from the planet's surface. She took the microphone. "A dinner party is when people get together to share food and celebrate friendship. We have plenty of food here. More than we can eat. You could try some if you want." Another long pause. "We do not consume prepared organic matter. We process raw biological material for conversion to mechanical components." "That sounds terrible," Maria said. "Have you ever tried fresh bread or fruit? Or soup made with vegetables that were growing yesterday?" The communication channel went quiet. In the Vorthak fleet, something unprecedented was happening. The machine's central computers were trying to process the concept of food as celebration, rather than just fuel. Their programming had no category for this. The attack began 3 hours later, but it wasn't like any Vorthak attack in recorded history. Instead of the usual coordinated assault, the machine ship seemed confused and hesitant. They approached the human vessel slowly, as if they weren't sure what they were supposed to attack. Captain Manning's defense frigate engaged the first Vorthak ship to come within weapons range. But the real battle was happening on a different level entirely. As the fighting began, the human agricultural ships increased food production to maximum levels. The abundance became a beacon of life energy so powerful that it could be detected from across the solar system. Every farming dome, every hydroponic bay, every greenhouse was producing food at levels that defied belief. The electromagnetic signature of growing plants, processing kitchens, and massive food distribution created a signal that the Vorthak ships couldn't ignore. "They're changing course," reported Lieutenant Chen. "Multiple Vorthak ships are breaking formation and heading directly for us." "Good," Rodriguez said. "That's exactly what we want." As Vorthak ships approached the abundance, something strange happened. The machines were programmed to consume organic matter efficiently, but the sheer abundance of life signals from the human ship overloaded their processing systems. Ships that had been working together for decades began competing with each other to reach the source of the organic energy. Colonel Ward watched from the planet's surface as Vorthak ships actually began fighting each other in orbit. "Ray, are you seeing this?" Agent Foster was monitoring Vorthak communications from his intelligence station. "Their command structure is breaking down. They're receiving so many signals of organic abundance that their priority systems can't decide what to attack first." The climactic moment came when the largest Vorthak ship, A massive consumer-class vessel designed to strip entire planets approached the Abundance directly. Instead of firing weapons, it extended massive collection arms toward the human ship. Rodriguez made a decision that would become legendary. All stations redirect power from defensive systems to agricultural production. I want every single food processor on this ship running at maximum capacity. Sir, that will leave us completely defenseless, warned his tactical officer. No, Rodriguez said, watching the Vorthak ship approach. It will make us indigestible. The Abundance pumped out food production signals so intense that the Vorthak ship's collection systems couldn't process them. The machine vessel, designed to consume struggling organic matter, was overwhelmed by the abundance of thriving life. Its collection arms retracted, then extended again, then retracted once more as its computers struggled to categorize what they were encountering. Finally, the Vorthak ship did something that had never been recorded in galactic history. It sent a message. Request clarification. Are you food source or food distributor? Maria Santos answered, We're friends offering dinner. Would you like to try some? 6 months after the first Xanthari plea for help, the galaxy looked completely different. The Vorthak swarm, once the most feared force in known space, had fragmented into dozens of smaller groups. Without their central coordination, they were manageable threats that local species could handle. More importantly, they had stopped expanding entirely. President Ellis stood on the observation deck of the UES Abundance, looking out at a sight that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. Xanthari children played in gardens that had been built in the ship's agricultural sections. Human and alien workers collaborated in kitchens that served food to dozens of different species every day. Through the viewports, he could see the lights of New Geneva Station, humanity's first permanent agricultural facility in another star system. Mr. President, said Admiral Hayes, approaching with a data tablet, I have the latest reports from the Galactic Council session. Ellis took the tablet and smiled as he read. 47 species had formally requested Earth's agricultural assistance. The Galactic Council had voted to establish the Universal Food Security Initiative, with Earth as the primary coordinator. Most remarkably, 3 former Vorthak ships had been converted into mobile farming platforms and were working alongside human vessels to restore dead worlds. How many harvest ships do we have operational now? Ellis asked. 237, sir. We're commissioning new ones every week. The Luna shipyards can barely keep up with demand. Commander Santos, now promoted to Admiral of Interspecies Culinary Development, joined them on the observation deck. She had just returned from the opening ceremony of the Galactic Culinary Institute on Xanthera Prime, where students from 63 species were learning not just cooking techniques, but the human philosophy behind them. How did the opening go? Ellis asked. Better than expected, Maria replied. We had to expand the facility twice just to accommodate all the applicants. There's a waiting list of students from species we've never even heard of. Through the viewports, they could see the newest addition to the Harvest Fleet, the UES Endless Table. This massive vessel was designed specifically for hosting interspecies diplomatic dinners. Its main dining hall could accommodate representatives from every known species in the galaxy, with specialized atmospheric controls and gravity fields to make everyone comfortable. Dr. Stevens had published his research on nutritional diplomacy the previous month. His work documented how proper nutrition affected interspecies psychology and conflict resolution. The results were remarkable. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now working together on agricultural projects. Trade disputes that had lasted decades were being resolved over shared meals. Paul's latest data shows a 67% reduction in armed conflicts galaxy-wide, Admiral Hayes reported. Turns out most wars really are about resource scarcity. When you eliminate scarcity, you eliminate most of the reasons to fight. Captain Rodriguez, now an admiral commanding the entire Harvest Fleet, was aboard the Endless Table preparing for its first major diplomatic mission. The Hegemony Council had requested human mediation in a territorial dispute between 2 species that had been fighting for 300 years. Instead of sending negotiators, Earth was sending chefs. The Corallians and the Nexari have been fighting over the disputed sector for generations, Rodriguez explained to his diplomatic team. Both species claim ancient rights to the same star systems. Traditional diplomacy has failed completely. What's our approach? Asked Commander Phillips, who now coordinated diplomatic food services. Simple, Rodriguez said. We invite both species to dinner, not on their territory, not on neutral ground, but here on the endless table. We feed them the best food they've ever tasted, and we keep feeding them until they remember that they have more in common than they have differences. The dinner was scheduled for the following week. Both species had initially refused to attend, but their positions softened when they learned that attendance included access to human agricultural technology. The Corallians' homeworld was experiencing crop failures. The Nexari were dealing with overpopulation and food shortages. Both problems could be solved with Earth's help. On Zenthera Prime, Elder Moric sat in his garden, watching his great-grandchildren play among fruit trees that had been planted by human agricultural specialists. The old alien had become something of a philosopher in his later years, often speaking about the transformation his people had experienced. Before the humans came, he told a reporter from the Galactic News Network, "We thought strength meant the ability to destroy. We measured power by how much we could take from others. The humans taught us that true strength is the ability to give more than you take." The reporter, a young Zenthari named Karis, was herself a product of the new era. She had grown up eating human-influenced cuisine and learning about different cultures through their food traditions. Elder Morix, some critics say that humanity's approach is just a new form of conquest, that they're creating dependence instead of independence. The old alien smiled and picked a piece of fruit from a nearby tree. "Child, look around you. Are we dependent? We grow our own food now, better than we ever did before. We trade with dozens of species. Our population is growing again. We have choices we never had before. That's not dependence, that's abundance." Back on Earth, the transformation was just as dramatic. The planet that had once struggled to feed its own population was now the agricultural center of the galaxy. Advanced farming techniques developed for alien worlds were improving crop yields on Earth. Cultural exchange programs brought alien students to study at human universities. While human students learned about agriculture on dozens of different worlds, Agent Foster, now Director of Galactic Agricultural Intelligence, was working on the most ambitious project yet, the restoration of the original Vorthak homeworld. The machine species had consumed their own planet so thoroughly that it was nothing but metal and rock. But human soil restoration techniques, combined with Zenthari agricultural knowledge and contributions from 40 other species, were slowly bringing it back to life. "The first grass grew yesterday," Foster reported to President Ellis during their weekly briefing. "It's not much, just a few square meters, but it's growing. In 100 years, that world could be green again." "And the Vorthak themselves?" Ellis asked. "That's the really interesting part. Some of them are learning to farm. They're still machines, but they're machines that grow food instead of consuming it. They're calling themselves the Cultivation Protocol now." The most remarkable change was in how the galaxy thought about conflict resolution. The old model of military intervention was being replaced by what human diplomats called aggressive hospitality. When tensions arose between species, the first response wasn't to send warships, but to send dinner invitations. The Endless Table hosted its first major success story when the Corallian-Nexari territorial dispute was resolved over a 7-course meal that included dishes from both cultures. The two species discovered that their agricultural traditions complemented each other perfectly. Instead of fighting over the disputed sector, they decided to jointly colonize it as an agricultural cooperative. "Food doesn't just nourish the body," Admiral Santos explained to her students at the Galactic Culinary Institute. "It nourishes relationships, cultures, and hope. When you sit down to eat with someone, it's hard to think of them as an enemy." As the first anniversary of the Zenthari rescue approached, preparations began for the largest celebration in galactic history. The Festival of Abundance would be held simultaneously on hundreds of worlds, with each planet contributing dishes that represented their unique culture and agricultural traditions. President Ellis recorded a message that would be broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. "A year ago, the Zenthari asked us for weapons to fight their war. We gave them something better. We gave them the ability to feed themselves and their neighbors. Today, that gift has grown into something none of us could have imagined. A galaxy where abundance is shared, where differences are celebrated over dinner tables, and where the greatest strength is measured not by what you can destroy, but by what you can create." The festival lasted for 3 days. On worlds that had been barren wastelands, Communities gathered to share meals made from crops that had been thought impossible to grow. Former enemies sat together, discovering that their traditional recipes had surprising similarities. Children who had never known hunger played together in gardens that stretched across continents. On the final night of the festival, as fireworks lit up the skies of 1,000 worlds, Ambassador Keelix stood with Captain Morrison on the observation deck of the Abundance. The Zenthari ambassador was no longer the thin, desperate alien who had first come to Earth. He was healthy, confident, and proud of what his people had accomplished. "Captain Morrison," Keelix said, "when my people first asked for your help, we thought we knew what we needed." "We were wrong," Morrison smiled. "What did you need?" "We needed to remember that there was something worth fighting for besides survival. We needed to remember what it felt like to hope for tomorrow instead of just enduring today. We needed to remember that we could create abundance instead of just managing scarcity." In the distance, the lights of